Before we get into today's interview with photographer Dan Winters, I wanted to tell you about a new file transfer tool I've been using lately called PicDrop. PicDrop is a file transfer tool that was designed by a professional photographer with photographers' needs in mind. With PicDrop, you can easily upload, archive, and share your files with clients, and even create private galleries for each of your jobs where clients can make selections for each shoot. Prior to PicDrop, I was just using outdated platforms like Dropbox and Google Drive to share my work with clients. But with PicDrop, they truly understand what professional photographers need, and it's just kind of streamlined my workflow. Like I know I got all my selects saved from all my shoots. I can log on easily on my phone or on my laptop and download files if I need to download a file quick to upload it online or whatnot. And it's just, I know my stuff is safe and it's there, and it's just really easy to use. So if you go to pickdrop.com and sign up today, you'll get 3 months free of PicDrop by entering the promo code PhotoBanter, one word, this PhotoBanter. So definitely go check it out and let me know what you guys think. But like I said, I've been using it for a while and can't recommend it enough. I love it. So go to pickdrop.com and remember to enter the promo code PhotoBanter, one word, when you sign up at pickdrop.com, and you'll get 3 months free. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Dan Winters. And thanks so much for listening. Welcome back to the Photo Banter podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gagne, and on today's podcast, I welcome back returning guest, photographer Dan Winters. Dan has worked with clients such as Time Magazine, Netflix, Wired, National Geographic, and the Smithsonian Magazine, to name a few. He has photographed everyone from Barack Obama, Elon Musk, Brad Pitt, and Bernie Sanders, to name a few. Dan has published several books, including Road to Seeing, where he shares his journey to becoming a photographer and his approach to work and creativity, which I highly recommend. Dan is someone whose work I've looked up to for a long time, and I have great admiration for Dan's knowledge and respect for the history of the photographic medium, as well as his work ethic. I was happy to get a chance to speak with Dan about what he's been working on recently, so I hope you enjoy, and thanks so much for listening. All right. Well, Dan Winters, welcome back to the program, man. I'm excited to talk to you again. It's been a crazy year to be a human being. How are you doing, man? Like, how's your year kind of been? And how's life out there in Texas and with everything going on, I guess?
It has sort of been unprecedented, that's for sure. I saw it manifest itself professionally in a lot of ways. A lot less air travel, much more driving stuff, which typically, if it's within sort of three or so hours of Austin, oftentimes I'll opt to drive just because, flying takes even longer than driving once you deal with all the baggage in the rental car and stuff. But sort of some more driving stuff. I just came back from West Texas. I was there for 6 days working on a photo essay on the Permian Basin. And that was all vehicle, all off the road there, and that was really fun. Worked on my movie a lot, which I was working on when I saw you before.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. Yeah, because you were like building sets out in your workshop and stuff out back when I was out there last time.
Exactly, yeah, and working on the miniatures and stuff like that. So we just a couple weeks ago we locked picture, so we have it fully edited, and it's in sound right now, and it's in music right now, and we're just starting to color grade. So all the sort of like final post stuff's coming together. I have to go out to LA to record the narration. A friend of mine's going to do the narration, so we have to go record that. But other than that, yeah, that's coming together. And it's one of those things too when you look at circumstances in your life, specifically the way I look at them anyways, what can I make of my circumstances right now? It's like clearly like work's died down. My inability to travel by air, or unwillingness, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like I totally took it to heart, man. I mean, I was like, okay, I'm gonna like live, no decisions I'm gonna make professionally are worth dying for. So definitely gonna like oh definitely going. Travis told me to mute my phone. Definitely gonna take advantage of this. So, the way it manifested itself for me was like spending a ton of time on the movie. We spent about 60 days editing, and I got a knee replacement surgery, which, took me down for a couple months, but I totally took advantage of it. I said to Kath, I'm like, I need to have this knee replaced for like 7 or 8 years. I put it off because, I don't want to, let my guys down, but they were able to go on unemployment, and I was able to get the surgery and recover and work on the movie and all the things. I worked on. I have several books that I've been working on, so I worked on those and just kind of really just took advantage of the time off, knowing full well that once we get through this, things are going to start back up again. They already have, to be honest with you. So just kind of one day at a time. What about you?
Yeah, man. I mean, this year's been weird, man. Like I've been talking to about a lot of people, and like you and myself, like a lot of my work's based around people shooting portraits, and I've been doing my assignment work that comes in. But other than that, like I haven't really been setting up like any personal like portrait shoots just with everything going on. Like I know some people are doing like virtual shoots, some people are still doing stuff like shooting outdoors. I just kind of have just kind of been putting a pause on it. So it's just been kind of a, I don't know, kind of definitely had some like weeks and months there where I was just kind of depressed because it's like not, because I usually like a type of person, I always got like a project going on that I'm working on, and it's always like portrait based. So for me right now, I'm just trying to figure out like what I can do during this time and just find something to photograph, which is kind of something I'm still just trying to navigate through right now.
hmm One of the things also that I've kind of taken advantage, taking advantage of the time off, obviously, is reading, watching films, but also going through my archive and doing archival organization, especially the digital archive, especially like my personal digital archive of stuff that, I shoot for myself. Just the gift of being able to sit for, 5 or 6 hours and just edit and really, look at stuff. And I think my X100 catalog has like 54,000 photos in it. So the idea of like being able to really go through that and have sort of fond memories of like moments that I'd forgotten, and be able to mark them up in some coherent way and get some edit in Lightroom, so assign some value to the images and stuff like that. That's also been a great thing. So,
Yeah.
and studio organization, and I've done more reading in the last several months than I had in quite a while. I used to spend a lot of time on planes reading. That was kind of my reading time, and that's completely like I haven't been on a plane in almost a year,
Yeah. Wow.
which is crazy because I fly 250,000 miles a year usually. So it's kind of like nuts that I haven't even been to an airport. Like I forgot what it's like almost. I'm totally fine with, by the way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. One thing I was gonna ask you, like, have you ever had like a point in your career where you just like haven't been satisfied with the work you're making? Like you're just like whatever creatively, or just kind of like a creative rut, or you just kind of feel like you're doing the same thing over and over again. Like, have you ever had periods like that? And like how do you kind of work through those like ruts, I guess?
I think about, if I think about my career, I can look back at times when I was doing better work than other times, maybe, or maybe I was experimenting and it wasn't working. But I think when I'm making the work, I always feel like I'm doing the best job I can. Like I try as hard as I can. I think one of the, I don't know if we would refer to it as a rut or whatever, but, I was talking to someone about this recently, and I did a really good interview with Medium Format magazine,
Yep.
and he had asked me a question about Olaf had asked me a question about uh, you know going into scenarios and how to react to them and this and that, and like I was talking to Heisler, Greg Heisler, like a month or so ago, maybe a couple months ago, and we were talking about style versus sensibility. So the idea of, and you and I have talked about that as well. The idea of like a style is he kind of shared with me a quote from Arnold Newman, and Arnold said apparently at one time to Greg, style is basically self-plagiarism, because you come up with something and then people want it and then they ask for it and then you go out and do it, and basically you're just kind of knocking off yourself. Maybe you would have just moved on, but people are looking at your archive and they're saying like, oh, we really like this portrait, can you do something like this for us? So when that happens, it can be a little bit frustrating, only because, you know, I don't want to say you go through the motions, because certainly every time I try to do it, regardless of doing it, I try to grow, and I try to maybe bring something different to it, so that it's not just completely, excuse me, completely like, self-plagiarism. But I think if I were to speak to any frustration, I would probably say, that would be one. And then the other thing is like what people's expectations are. I was thinking earlier, I was looking at my Instagram earlier, and Kath texted me like earlier this morning, and she said, "Oh, you should post something on Instagram today." So I usually do one or two posts a week. And the way I look at Instagram for me is like, it's sort of like, back in the day, people used to do like promo cards and stuff, and
Yep.
the idea of like keeping yourself in the forefront of someone's mind. So Instagram kind of to me is like promo cards in the 21st century. But I posted a picture of Anthony Hopkins, and I started thinking about the amount of things I've posted that were like really dear to my heart, like, collages, or like, black and white personal work that I would post, or this or that, and how few likes those things get. And I post a freaking actor or some celebrity, and they get like, 6,000 likes. And it makes me like wonder about like the people that follow me on Instagram. Like, you're not even looking at like my work, you're looking at like X movie star, and then, oh, I like that, it's shiny. So I feel like I have a really loyal base of like 2,000 people, and then
Hey, that's
and
good.
then
That's good.
and then the rest of the people, it's almost more like it's because who it is, it's not because it's of the photo. And I know that, because if I look at some like actors Instagram, they'll post like the dumbest thing.
Hmm.
It's not even like worthy of like looking at half the time, and it's like 40,000 likes or whatever.
Yeah.
So you can't, I don't look at Instagram and get crusty about it at all. I just kind of, it amuses me to a degree, but I also understand it's like a necessary tool in today's environment. I feel like if I wasn't on Instagram, I in some way would be uh, uh, not sort of acknowledging my professional career to its full potential.
And I appreciate that you actually will answer people's questions, because there's definitely some photographers out there that they have it. You can tell they're not even running it. It's like someone else, and
Mhm.
and I was reading through the comments, and one of your followers actually had like an interesting question. He was talking about, he asked, do you think it's still possible to make a masterpiece nowadays, like with so much being photographed? Or he said something to the effect of like, can you make a masterpiece in one picture, or is it more built on the course of like an entire career and body of work? And
Mhm.
because like one in your book, Road to Seeing, you kind of talk about one of Henry Cartier-Bresson's pictures, behind the Gare of Saint Lazare, as
Mhm.
being like one photo that is this like above and beyond, this kind of affected you. Like, do you even view pictures as like singular like masterpieces like that, or are you more
Mhm.
looking at your work as like this kind of an overall like body of work, I guess?
Well, I think the body work's important because it's a much more expanded version of someone's voice, right?
Yep.
Like, if it's a singular image that works, that's one thing. But if it's a giant body of work, I think about Bruce Davidson, for example. Like, Bruce Davidson, absolutely brilliant photographer, absolutely like some singular blue chip standout images. But when you look at his body of work, it's just like one after another after another after another brilliant images, which is important. And I do think that I do think it certainly is, and obviously, you talk about masterpiece and the idea of that being subjective. I think the universal appeal of that Cartier-Bresson image that we just talked about, I think kind of universally people respond to that image. And I think I know that was one image that I saw that was like a image that changed. There are a few. There's a Stieglitz image, that the Winter Fifth Avenue by Stieglitz, really like stopped me in my tracks. Behind the Gare at Saint Lazare definitely stopped me in my tracks, and there have been many over the years that have, for sure. But yeah, I do think that masterful work is being created. But I understand the idea of like the body of work, and the idea that you know it's kind of like an album or a band, if you have a single that's a huge hit, it's
Yep.
kind of one hit wonder thing. But if you have a band that has a deep, deep catalog, and certainly they have like, Stairway to Heaven, and they have, you know, Black Dog, and they have rock and roll, and, Zeppelin 4, for example. But, it's like the Beatles and Zeppelin, like you can keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper into their catalog, and there's like profound work in there. So I would say like many masterpieces, but also like a masterful body of work, I think.
Yeah.
Good question. No, that was a good question. I remember when he asked that question.
Yeah. I always think like, because you think about like photography, so much has been photographed up to this point, and people are taking more pictures than ever. But I still don't get sick of like looking at like, I don't know, maybe this is a random thing, like pictures of the Grand Canyon or like Yellowstone. Obviously, those
Mhm.
things have been photographed a million times, but for me, it's like, all right, let's see what your perspective is and see what you can do with it and see what the weather was like that day, or like what's going on. It's the same location, but like I think that's the cool thing about photography. Even still at this point, everyone's got a different perspective, and it's like harder to do something different. But when someone does, that's like the cool thing about it for me.
Mhm. I think that the interesting thing about the two things that you mentioned, this is something I've thought about quite a bit too. The idea of like, what are we responding to when we respond to an image, right? Are we responding to the image itself, or are we responding to the idea of the image? So, like, Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon are things that we respond to emotionally, regardless of the quality of the image right off the bat, right? It's the same, Ansel Adams images in Yosemite. We're responding first and foremost to the grandeur of Yosemite, and then the masterful capture that he's able to make, and composition. But I remember the first time I saw Yosemite Valley. Um, there's a turnoff off the road that you pull into to park to have this amazing overlook of Yosemite Valley. And I was like, this is where Ansel Adams shot from. He literally pulled his car over
Yeah.
and shot from the parking lot. I'm like, this is where he shot from. Because I think you see those images and you imagine this like giant backpack with a tripod and like hiking to these vantage points that are like
Didn't they use
almost,
I think he brought like a donkey with them or something that would like carry their gear and shit. I could be wrong. I
yeah,
remember.
I don't doubt that in some cases, but in this case, Yosemite Valley, the shot of Yosemite, storm clearing Yosemite Valley, which is
Yeah.
probably his biggest blue chip image.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a phenomenal image. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I think it's amazing. And I think when you can make like a phenomenal image in a situation like that and heighten it to the point where it's something we've seen many times, but it's heightened to the point where it feels like it's been seen anew. I think that's a really incredible achievement. um, he photographed Hernandez, New Mexico, moonrise at Hernandez, New Mexico.
Yep.
And I was in Santa Fe with my wife Catherine, who you've spoken with. And I said one day, we were just vacationing, and I was like, oh, let's drive up to Hernandez and try to find where Ansel Adams stood when he shot that shot. So we drove up there, and I had a print of it that I printed out at the hotel. And so we kind of triangulated, used the mountains in the foreground, and there's a church, and there's a cemetery, and this and that. You can find where he shot it, and you look at it, and it's completely underwhelming.
Yeah.
And yet that photograph is like mind blowing. So, you can take something that, is going to be completely overlooked by the majority of the public and show them something new. And I think that would be a partial sort of definition of a master to me. It's so difficult in the portrait world. You know, a lot of the people I shoot have been photographed so many times.
Yep.
So like, how can I make an iconic photograph of this person? What can I add to the already existing archive of images of this person that's going to make it, special, that's going to have its own life? It's challenging. It's very challenging.
Yeah.
Very challenging.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of going off that, in terms of like stuff's been photographed a lot. You recently just did an assignment for Nat Geo, photographing at one of the SpaceX launches. I was just kind of curious, like how that kind of came about, and like how do you approach shooting those launch shoots? Because like launch has been photographed a lot by different people, and like how do you kind of put your touch on it, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, the launch thing is can be tough. I think a lot of the guys out there that shoot launches, they try to they try to make it like an environmental portrait a little bit. Like if I look at like shooting a shuttle launch as like a portrait of the shuttle,
Yeah.
um, I really hone in on the shuttle. You know, I don't try to like show sort of like the pond with like a bird flying and this and that. You know, I try to just make it about. I approach it like I would do a portrait of someone. The SpaceX launch was tricky because SpaceX doesn't allow any media to cover their stuff, uh, not in a sanctioned way.
Got it.
So they lock it all down. They have a couple guys that work for them that are actually good. And then Bill Ingalls, who's NASA's official photographer, he shoots them because SpaceX and NASA work together all the time. And those guys are all doing good work. And, you know, it's like, it's pretty difficult considering they have like access where they can set remote cameras and they can, you know, with sound triggers on them, and they can pretty much have a run of the place.
Yeah.
The launch I just shot for National Geographic was no different. You know, we had no access to the launch facilities or anything, so it's pretty frustrating. I set one camera on the beach, really close, public beach, with a sound trigger on it on a tripod, and the night before, and we went back to retrieve it, and someone had put like trash over the lens,
Fuck.
and it was a SpaceX security guy, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I shot from a rooftop with a 1200 millimeter lens and got a really cool launch photo, like an ascension photo. I got a good apogee image, and then it blew up when it landed. And so I got a good crash photo out of it from where we were. We were 32 floors up on a high rise condo building.
Wow.
Shooting from there, and we had an incredible like view of everything. You know, it was like amazing. But you know, of course, you want to be able to get in there and set your frame and do it. But the truth is, of all the stuff that I've seen that came out of that launch so far, the one we did from that building top was like a really unique image, you know, and our explosion shot is like a really unique explosion shot. You know, we got like the hopper, which was the last test that they did with the hopper. It's in the picture with the explosion, and you really get a sense of scale from it and stuff. But yeah, it's tough, you know, it's tough when you gotta, you know, dealing with SpaceX is like, they pretty much shut everybody down. They want to have control over what goes out, period. They just want to have control over what goes out, you know?
Yeah, it's surprising that even with like National Geographic being such an iconic magazine, they didn't even want to give them access, I guess.
No, they don't care. They really don't. I mean, if they had crappy photographers on staff that were putting out garbage, they might
Yeah.
like consider it. But the guys are doing good work. I mean, I'll give it up to them. I don't know who the guys are, but I
Yeah.
see stuff come out of SpaceX, and it's like, yeah, that's a great shot. You know, good job. Like, I wish I had access to that thing to shoot it, but they want to control the feed, and that's all there is to it. You know, so that's what we got to deal with.
And with that, was that something that you had pitched to Nat Geo to cover, or they came to you with that launch, or like how did the whole project, I guess, come together?
Yeah, I'm working on kind of a longer term project with them, and that seemed like that was something that I pointed out. I said, "Well, look, this launch is coming up. You know, I'd gone down there 3 times. It kept getting canceled,
Yeah.
and it was a 6 hour drive to get down there, and then lug all our stuff up to the rooftop, and then they canceled it, and then we had to go back down 2 weeks later and canceled it, and then we went again, and fortunately, it flew. But that's aerospace as well. You know, scrub launches are common in aerospace. Um, you know, some little alarm will go off like right before the launch is meant to take place, and the whole thing auto shuts down. You know, shuts
Yeah.
down automatically. But that was something I sort of like brought to their. I don't even want to say pitch, but I guess it's kind of a pitch. I just said, hey, you know, I feel like this is an important piece of this project, and they approved it, you know, right away. And but yeah, as far as like, you know, National Geographic normally is an incredible in. You know, when I'm working with NASA, they bend over backwards to accommodate us, and always have. And you know, I've worked in Kazakhstan at Baikonur, and even the Soviets totally like have reverence for National Geographic and took incredible care of us when we were over there and stuff.
Yeah. Then you got to actually photograph the last launch of Discovery, which was in, I believe, February 2011, right?
Yeah, I did Discovery in February. I think Endeavor was like June, and then Atlantis was in like August. I shot all three of them, the last three launches of the last three shuttles. Yeah,
No, it was
there were
awesome.
five originally, but Challenger and Columbia both suffered catastrophic failures. And so there were 3 orbiters left, plus Enterprise, which was suborbital. You know, it was just basically a aerodynamics test bed. Um, you watched For All Mankind last night.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I watched it again after we did that interview a couple years ago. I watched it, and then I was watching it again last night, and yeah, it's just amazing. Yeah, this with Brian, the music and everything, just the footage. It's like truly incredible. Like anybody, it's on. If you got HBO Max now, they got For All Mankind's on there, so go check it
Is
out.
it on there? Yeah, good.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
on there.
yeah, it's a masterpiece. My friend Al Reinert, who actually wrote the foreword for my shuttle book, Last Launch, uh, directed that film, and he passed away last year.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was sad. I had lunch with him like 2 weeks before he died. It's great seeing him for the last time. But yeah, he worked on that film for 8 years,
Wow.
and it's so talk about a masterpiece. I mean, in my opinion, that is like one of the greatest documentaries ever made. You know, and I love the idea that like there are no talking heads. It's all the oration is all Apollo astronauts, flown astronauts, but we see just beautiful imagery of, space flight, et cetera, and not sort of guys sitting in a library or whatever,
Yeah, definitely. No, it was awesome. And how do you view aerospace now? Like, you know a lot more about it than I do. There seems like there's a lot of players in the game now. You got SpaceX, NASA. There's like Virgin Galactic, and then Bezos has his thing, Blue Origin. They all kind of seem like they have different goals, probably. Do you think it's a good thing to have all these different players kind of in the aerospace game now with aerospace, or how do you kind of view the different like?
Yeah, I think if we think about like the history of space travel, for example, like NASA never made anything, right? They commissioned everything, right? So Grumman made the lander, North American made the capsule, Rocketdyne, Rockwell made the engines. There was different manufacturers for each component piece that of the spacecraft, right? So in a way, there were always like independent aerospace contractors that were building the pieces that were put together to do the missions. The difference today is that none of those companies that were building the pieces were actually flying the pieces, right? NASA was flying them.
Yep.
So NASA was involved in specking out what they needed. Contractors were building what NASA needed, and then NASA was responsible for the flights. So today, what's happening is, SpaceX, while they're also manufacturing stuff that NASA is supervising the flights, like, the Dragon capsule coupled to the Falcon to take crews up to the ISS, which we've seen twice now, and a third time it will happen in March. There'll be another one. Um, uh, that's not super unique. But what is unique is that SpaceX operates their own launch facility, and they're heavily embedded in the satellite game, and that's where the money is. People want to get satellites up there, and it's by the pound. People pay by the pound, and so we're trying to make smaller and smaller and smaller satellites, obviously, which they're doing very well these days. And it's within reach of smaller companies now to actually have a satellite, communication satellite or weather satellite or whatever it is up there. Um, there's also NASA contracts that people want. So Boeing, for example, has built a capsule that is competing with the Dragon capsule, which is SpaceX's capsule. It's called the Orion. And so there's people that are sort of levying and jockeying for position within the sort of future use of hardware. And then there's also missions, like there's Starlink, which is a geostatic satellite that is, I'm pretty sure it's geostatic, that is going to be positioned at the moon. That's kind of going to be like a waypoint or a jumping off point for lunar missions that are going to go down to the moon, land on the lunar surface. So the SpaceX launch that I just watched, that's a stepping stone launch for a potential Mars landing, and also for the development of the lunar lander. And Blue Origin is also working on their model for the lunar lander. So that's a kind of a historical model. So they'll get money from NASA to do R&D to try to like come up with something. And then of course, just like military contracts, then NASA will award the final contract. So if the military puts out a contract for a fighter, multiple companies will like throw their hat in the ring, and they'll get money from the Air Force or from the Pentagon to build like their best version of this fighter, and they'll spend, $1 trillion building it, and then one of the companies is going to get the contract. So it's working that way. Now, the Virgin Galactic thing is very different. So the Virgin Galactic thing right now is geared around space tourism. And none of these other players are interested in space tourism at all.
Yeah.
So the space tourism game is basically, it's a little bit misleading, to be honest with you. Like, I feel like I think there are 500 people now that have signed up to go at 350 a pop, 350,000 a pop for 7 minutes of free fall.
7 minutes is
Yeah. Well, it's 7 minutes of free fall. So they'll experience reduced gravity for 7 minutes, which is cool. But what they don't really,
you could just go David Blaine style, hook yourself up to some balloons and this go.
exactly. So the funny thing about this model is really what you're doing is you're flying, you're flying way up, and you're flying a parabola. So you're flying a big, here's my parabola here, flying a big curve and going back down. And at the apogee and at the descent, you start to float because everybody's free falling at the same time. So the spacecraft's free falling, you're free falling. So everybody's like free falling. If you could be stationary in that same position, there would be totally normal gravity. You'd just be walking around the inside of the plane, right? But because you can't stay stationary and are flying this parabola, you're going to experience what they call free fall, which is which people erroneously refer to as zero gravity. So there's plenty of gravity right there. You're just in a free fall mode, right? So everything's falling at the same rate, including you. So you don't have really any attachment to the spacecraft. In fact, I think you unbuckle your belt and they let you float around for a while, and then you have to buckle your belt back up. And so whatever. I mean, it's still good. It's basically like an extended version of the Vomit Comet, which is the KC-135 that flies parabolas. And you experience in the Vomit Comet, I think you experience like, I don't even remember what it is. It's a couple minutes. It's not super long, but it's the same kind of thing where you experience that sensation of reduced gravity.
Yeah. And you actually had the opportunity to photograph Elon Musk a few years back. What was kind of your experience photographing him? He seems like an interesting dude. I've like listened to a lot of interviews with him and follow him on Twitter and stuff. And he's an interesting guy.
Yeah, he's a very interesting guy. I was really excited about it because definitely passionate about the subject. So I took advantage of my FaceTime with him the kind of most interesting thing we were talking about was like the specific impulse of rocket engines, which is the hurdle that people that are designing rocket engines struggle with. And basically it refers to like the efficiency of the engine. So you have an equation of like fuel to power. So really what a rocket does when it takes off, the reason it's struggling is because it's full of fuel. And as the fuel bleeds off, the rocket becomes lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. The speed increases, and then you get to orbit. But really, you reach a point of diminishing returns where if you put any more fuel in this thing, it can't take off. You see what I'm saying? So it's like this thing. So specific impulse speaks to like the efficiency of an engine. If you can make an engine that's generating power in a more efficient way, then you can launch a heavier payload without adding fuel. That's kind of the idea of it. And the shuttle used 3 liquid fueled engines and 2 solid fueled engines on the sides, the solid fuel rockets, the SRB, solid rocket boosters. And so I was asking him about using solid rocket boosters in addition to liquid fueled engines. And so we had a like informed conversation while I was shooting. Like I kind of just took advantage of the FaceTime to talk to him a little bit about that because I find it fascinating. And I knew that he had just created a new engine, which he was really excited about at the time, the Merlin, which is named after the engine that's in the Spitfire and the P-51 Mustang in World War II. So I thought that was kind of a cool touch. But yeah, he's obviously very interesting, very eccentric guy. Can't imagine what it would be like to be that guy in terms of like pressure. Just like I can't imagine that kind of pressure in my life, like the insanely huge, like broad strokes that he seems to like, decisions he seems to make on a regular basis that are like mind-numbingly complex.
Yeah. I
Pretty
think
impressive.
I think he just moved to Texas too.
Yeah, he moved to Austin. Mhm.
Yeah, interesting. One more aerospace thing, and then I'll get into photography before my listeners kill me. Uh, this week, big thing. Did you see the great conjunction with Saturn and Jupiter the other
Oh yeah.
day? Yeah,
Oh yeah, it was amazing.
yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah,
it
it was
was.
amazing.
Yeah, for anybody listening, it was basically the great conjunction, Saturn and Jupiter. Basically, I think it's every 400 years was the last time they were just close in orbit, if I
Mhm.
read correctly, right?
Yeah, visibly. Yeah, they're still like super far apart, but the orbits kind of like connected. They were,
Yeah.
still millions of miles apart. But yeah, it's beautiful from our vantage point to see that. Yeah, I have this app that I should share with the listeners too. This app's called Star Walk.
Oh yeah, I've used that app. It's great. It's good for people who want to learn too.
It's the best app in the world. Yeah,
Yeah.
you just I will go outside and every time I end up a better version of myself. Yeah, it's amazing. Really, really amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I recommend it. It's fun. And one thing I was interested in talking to you about in your book, Road to Seeing, you talk about like the practice of stillness.
Hmm.
I was curious, like what's your approach to that? Is like, do you do like meditation or how do you use the practice of stillness? Because this is something I think about a lot more with technology and your phone. Like, I feel like as the years go on, I have like worse and worse ADD at this point with the screens and everything. Like, what do you mean by that when you're talking about this, the practice of stillness in your book, I guess?
Well, I think, I mean, in reference to photography, I'll say,
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't feel like we can really see until we like stop and look, right? So the idea of, you know, I was telling one time I was walking down the street in New York with Kath, and I was shooting, and she got ahead of me, and she waited for me at the end of the block we were on. I think we were on Fifth Avenue, and she commented about, this is years ago, but I always remember it. She commented about how I was missing out on the experience of being in New York because I'm so focused on photographing.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh yeah, did you see that fork that was pressed in the pavement to the point where you could, And I started naming all this stuff that I saw, and I said, I would argue that I'm seeing it better
Yeah.
than because I'm actually in the process of looking. There's a great short story called Blow Up, which really has little to do with the film, which I also highly recommend. It's an incredible film. But there's a short story called Blow Up, and Cortazar wrote it, and there's one of the best descriptions of the photographic practice in that book, and the description of looking, and you know the idea of forcibly looking. But in terms of getting still, I feel like that requires like a dialogue. I think it's difficult for anyone to, we definitely lapse into kind of unconsciousness a little bit with the screens. And I was in the waiting room at the doctor's office the other day. I was getting my annual physical, and I sat down, I checked in and sat down, and I pulled my phone out and I looked up, and everyone in the waiting room was on their phone.
Yep.
No one was just sitting there. So I put my phone away and I just sat there and just experienced that. And it can be uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable. I had a friend of mine that was he wanted to start meditating, and he said he couldn't go longer than a minute
Yeah.
without like, a meltdown, right? And, Kath is incredible at meditating. She can go half hour without even like blinking an eye.
Wow.
But, the idea of like, I'll be honest with you, I talk to myself, I talk to myself sometimes, and I just say, let's take in where we are, what we're surrounded with in this moment, and really just try to be conscious of it. It takes work. It's not something that anyone that tells you they can live in that state uh, in perpetuity is not being straight with you. You can't. It's very difficult to do. But I think it takes practice. I think it takes practice. And I think we have to sit with the uncomfortable in order to get to the comfortable. Taking out your screen and wanting to get on your screen.
Yeah.
and saying, actually, I'm not going to get on my screen. I'm not going to do that. And I'm not like, down on screens. I mean, I loaded a whole bunch of stuff on my phone, and I've been editing this job that I just shot on the phone, not necessarily editing it, but like looking through the take and going like, okay, that's one for sure, that one, that one, that one, and like using it as a tool. So I'm working as I'm sort of sitting there on the phone, but checking the email, checking the stuff. Fortunately, I have Kath who like takes care of all that email
Yeah.
stuff. I hardly even look at my email.
Yeah.
And that's really nice. So I don't have to like worry about that. But I try to really be uh, conscious about the Instagram thing. I try to look at that as little as possible. Of course, you post something and then you want to see how it's doing. That's human nature. But to try to stay away from it. I posted a picture of Anthony Hopkins earlier today, and I haven't looked. I think I looked at it one time, so I don't know what it's doing, but
I can
maybe
look
just
right now. I can look at that. It's up
yeah,
to
look at it. Look
yeah,
at it.
look right now.
Yeah,
What's the
that's so
analytics?
funny. Yeah.
Um, yeah, because like I'll go. I was in your book again. You kind of mentioned like when you're out in Hollywood earlier in your career, and you're kind of living like you said unconsciously, and
Mhm.
it's like really, really focused in your career, not spending enough time with family and friends. Do you think it's even possible to like have success and like people always talk about this thing like work-life balance? Can you even have both or not really? It seems like if you have like high goals and achieve stuff you have, like how do you even balance that? Is it possible?
Well, I would say that the launching point of it is pretty all-consuming, like getting it going.
Yeah.
And I think once you get it going, um, it becomes easier to sort of sit back and not worry as much about kind of like, I got to the point in my career, I remember, when I just believed that the universe would take care of things. Like if I
Hmm.
was honest with myself about the work I'm creating, working as hard as I can, doing the best work I can, and not like phoning it in and trying every time, I feel like the universe like takes care of you. Like
Yeah.
I really believe that, and it's shown to be the case, for me. Like I really, I feel like the work comes in when I need it, and when it does, I treat it with reverence, regardless of what it is. Whether it's like, a still life. I was looking at these still lifes I did of a piece of coal for Wired, and I was thinking like there are a lot of people probably that would slough this thing off and not give it as much attention as they would a portrait of like doing a portrait of the president or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think if you give it equal energy and attention, no matter what it is, you satisfy your clients. Obviously, they know you're going to do the best job you can, but also you're being true to your own sort of artistic pursuit. I think marginalizing any kind of aspect, but also knowing when to turn things down. That's not to say that sort of everything is a great fit, but once you accept something or once you agree uh, to sort of like spend your energy on a job or an assignment or whatever it is, then obviously, you want to do the best you can. I mean,
And
it needs to be the same amount of energy if it's for like a local publication or like the cover of the New York Times Magazine. Like it should be the same exact expenditure of passion and energy and pursuit of perfection, regardless of what it's for.
100%. And when you do turn something down, is it just you're not interested in it? You don't think you're the right fit for it? Like you don't think you could do a good enough job at it, or is it just the finances of it, or like what when you do? Because like this is the thing I worry about. Like I rarely ever turn shit down because I just need everything I can get. But it's like the worry I think a lot of divers, if you turn something down, it's like, oh, they'll never hit that magazine will never contact me again because I said no or something. And then like
Mhm.
those opportunities, because like I mean, opportunities are few and far between now. There's less magazines. A lot of magazines that used to be monthly might be bi-monthly. I know, like Popular Science is only 4 times a year now. It's seasonal, so it's like, how do you make those decisions at this point? Or you're going to turn something down?
Well, I mean, there aren't a lot of jobs that come to me that I turn down, and I
Yeah,
think it's partially because when people come to me, they kind of are familiar with my work
yeah,
and want something that I have to offer.
yep,
Um, Things I would say that I would turn down. I learned a valuable lesson one time when I got an assignment to photograph um, W. George Bush, and I didn't like his presidency. I didn't like what he did in the presidency, specifically,
Yeah.
especially with the war and like, kind of a kind of an unprovoked attack on Iraq and stuff, which kind of goes against our American kind of ethos, about unprovoked attack onto a sovereign nation. So I kind of was crusty about that, and I got an assignment to photograph him, and I didn't want to do it. And Kath didn't respond to the magazine for a while about it, or a little while, and she kept saying, you should do it. You should do it, and you should uh, you should see what it's like. You're judging someone uh, maybe unfairly, or you should do the assignment. So I finally was like, okay, I'll go do the assignment, and I just kind of like approached it as though he was another human being
Yep.
doing the best he can with what he could, flawed like we all are. And we had like a great shoot. It was at the ranch. It's a beautiful day, beautiful photos, like super proud of like what I did. Had a great shoot with him. He was fun. He did this really funny thing, like within maybe 5 or 6 minutes of the shoot starting, he just looked at me and he goes, Dan Winters, you're a great American. Which I got a kick out of. Did I ever tell you that story?
Yeah.
I told you that story last time.
It's all good though. Yeah,
It's one of my favorite stories.
no,
So,
it's great, man. Yeah, because it is like that. Yeah, it's
but I guess it speaks to what you brought up, which is why I'm using it now. The idea of like, so basically, if it's an assignment that I don't feel like I'm going to do anything with, that maybe is someone that I don't necessarily want to be associated with,
yeah,
or I don't feel, the way I look at it now, honestly, is what is my investment going to be? Am I going to have to travel?
yeah,
Am I going to have to spend a bunch of time away from home, away from Kath, to do this job that I don't really see as enriching or being an addition to my archive? If sort of the answer is yes in any of those things, then maybe it's something that someone else would do a better job at. I mean, someone wanted me to shoot, I can't even remember her name now. Who was the Kellyanne Conway?
yeah,
And I was like, man, I don't want to shoot her. Like, what would I do with a picture of her?
yeah,
So I turned it down. I was like, no,
yeah,
I don't want to do it. And they got someone else to do it. Guy did a totally fine job. He probably like, I know I talked to Nadav Kandar
yep,
about shooting Trump, and he had this idea that that it was small-minded to refuse shooting portraits of people just because you disagreed with them. And I was like, I totally disagree, man. Like, I wouldn't shoot Trump. There's no way. I mean, I have like my own artistic like soul to contend with here. And the idea that I would have to travel to DC, I would have to be away from Kath, I would have to do all this stuff for a picture I totally don't want. Like, I don't understand why I should do that and why that would be small-minded. So it was an interesting conversation.
yeah, definitely. It's
But
like the only thing they're not making more. They're not making time. That's you're not
they're
getting
not
any
making
more.
any more time.
Yeah,
And especially like time with, I value my time at home. I value my time with Kath,
totally. And one series of photos that were for me like were extremely powerful of yours that I looked at. The New Yorker published 4 years ago of your good friend Brett Kilroy. And you
Mhm.
kind of you photographed kind of the last I believe he had, was it colon cancer he passed away from, correct?
Mhm.
um and you photograph kind of him and the last 4 years of him dealing with this terrible illness. I guess what kind of compelled you to kind of document that process, and like what do you kind of take away when you photographing that, I guess?
It's an interesting question. So Brett was one of my dearest friends, and he was a longtime collaborator. He was the head of the art department at RCA Records,
Yep.
and he and I collaborated on a lot of music stuff. And when he first was diagnosed, we were having this conversation, and he had to go to Sloan Kettering to have a procedure done where they were going to remove part of this tumor. And I was there in New York, and I went with him, and I hung out with him in his room, and like took pictures of like the scar and the, just the, the incision and all that stuff. So it was like one of those things where I just photographed this thing.
Hmm.
And then we kind of came up with this idea that I should document this whole thing that he's going through, so that once he emerged on the other side, we'd have this archive. So I just started shooting everything, and I spent a lot of time with him, and he spent a lot of time. He would come down to our house and stay in Austin. He would, I would go to New York and stay with him whenever I was doing a job in New York. Even though there was always hotel budgets, I would always stay with him, and just like ended up photographing him a lot. And it got pretty dark, and I photographed. Sorry,
It's all good.
I photographed when it got dark, and then he kind of came out of it and photographed that, and then it got really bad at the end. And I talked to him about it, near the end, about the photo project, which was thousands of images at that point. And I'm doing that and doing 10 other things at the same time. That was
Hmm.
just like this thing we had going on. And it was very apparent that he wasn't going to leave the hospital. He was ambulatory still at this time. So we took a walk around the ward, around the wing that he was in at Sloan Kettering together, and talked about a lot of things, and kind of made our apologies and our gratitude list, etc. And I brought up the photo project, and I said, I'm going to just keep shooting this stuff. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, shoot everything, shoot till the end. So I shot all the way till the end after he passed. I did a beautiful sort of portrait of his body, and it was really powerful for me, and really painful. And it's really interesting. I show that we're kind of an expanded version of that New Yorker piece when I speak. And I can't tell you how many people come up to me afterwards and with gratitude about having shown that how many people have gone through cancer, with people with loved ones, family members, friends, etc., that are just like, oh my God, I was so completely touched by those photographs of your friend. I lost my best friend to cancer, this and that. Like, so you start to realize the power of imagery, obviously, to affect people on a very deep level. And it brings it to a uniter. Like, you have that shared experience with that individual. They come up to you and sort of share their personal connection to it, and you suddenly have something in common with someone that you've never met. Kind of, have always loved that quality to photography.
Yeah, definitely. No, they're really powerful images, and like you said, like everyone knows someone probably in their family that's either passed away from cancer, or has dealt with it. So really, really something people can relate to, and it's a hard thing to talk about. But very powerful images, and I mean, Brett Kilroy, that guy, I didn't read about him. He did some amazing work. He designed the legendary Old Dirty Bastard,
Hmm.
the Return to 36 Chambers, that logo, which has been like people have copied it like a million times, and he did like amazing work for like Kings of Leon, Taylor
Hmm.
Swift, Foo Fighters, legendary designers. So
Hmm.
really, really amazing guy. It sounded like.
Yeah,
Uh,
Brett was a very special person.
yeah, and someone, I was talking to some fellow photographers, and I was asking people some questions to ask you, and they were curious about your studio space. And I've been to it. It's quite the building. I was just kind of curious the backstory, like how you found it. What was kind of process to kind of, did you have to do a lot of work to it when you moved in, or?
um so it's kind of a classic case of like, watch what you wish for, because we were in LA. I had a beautiful studio. In fact, I lament the fact that I don't have it anymore, only because I love spending time in it. But I had a studio right in Hollywood, um, in the old Technicolor building, and it was a wonderful space, very airy. It was on the second floor, so I had all these windows that looked out onto Cahuenga Boulevard. And when we moved down to Austin, I held on to it for a little while, but I had told Kath, I was like, I want a building out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what I found. So a friend of mine and I were at the post office in Dripping Springs, Texas, which is about 7 miles away from here. And I had put an offer on another old archival, I mean, vintage building in Dripping Springs, and I was talking to the woman that worked at the post office, and I said, "Oh yeah, I put an offer in for this building down the road," and she said, "Oh, you know, the general store in Driftwood is for sale," and it just went on the market, and so we drove straight over, and the guy that owned it was here, and I kind of looked around and went out in the back, and I was like, "I'll take it," like on the spot, shake hands, kind of thing, like classic, sort of like something my dad would do. Um, but yeah, it was just kind of there, you know. And to be honest with you, you know, I'm thinking about leaving it too. I'm thinking about moving, thinking about building a studio on my property where I live.
Yeah.
So I can just get up and walk to work,
Yeah.
and you know, it won't affect anything at all for me in terms of work. You know, it'll still have a big wood shop. It'll still have all the things that I have
Hmm.
here, so I can keep working in the way that I work. But it'll be, you know, less of a drive, and it's really growing out here as well. Like you can hear sirens going by and stuff. I mean, I know
Yeah.
I mean, there's an accident down the road,
Yeah.
um, but it you know, I think it kind of found me to a degree, you know, a little bit. You know, I mean, I love early century, mid-century American architecture and sort of the nostalgia of that period. And certainly this building was built in 1903, so it's like 100 and what, 100 years old, 113 years old.
Yeah, it felt like a museum. That's like the going. I thought I took a bunch of pictures of when I was there. Yeah, it was just like. And then they, I think it's important to like. I've been trying to make a point of it. Like I got some artwork now, and it's like having a workspace and an environment. It can kind of inspire you, like the books and the photos you had on the wall. At least for
Mhm.
me, there's like an energy to it almost a little bit.
Yeah. It also, for me, like doing that and creating that environment and creating the sort of the library and all the things, you know, we can definitely, I don't know if get stuck is the proper word to use, but we can definitely like always use inspiration, and we can find inspiration. You know, I always find like your output is directly related to all the things that you've been exposed to in your life,
Hmm.
right? So what you're, you know, giving back to the universe in the way that you're expressing your passion in the universe through photography or through art is, you know, a collective sort of a collective um, kind of fusion of everything you've ever been exposed to, you know, and that stuff is what you're spitting out, you know, not spitting out necessarily, but, and sometimes, you know, influences are more prominent than others, but even subtle, like nuanced things that you've been exposed to are in some way informing your work. So I think it's important to be around beauty and to be around things, you know, we're photographers, right? We're completely, our everything we do is based on having something to respond to.
Hmm.
You know, we have to have something in front of us in order to make a picture.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the idea of like being surrounded by kind of beauty and objects that are inspirational, I think is really important actually. Yeah, the idea of like a pure white studio, like the whole like cliche kind of, if you're watching like Mad Men or
Black
something,
black leather couches and all
yeah, they
that.
like, how inspirational is that? It's not at all. When I shoot at like Pier 59, it's like soulless to me, man. I mean, it has to be at a place like that because you're getting a lot of different people in there. But if it was my own personal studio, I mean, my studio in LA was the same as the one here. It's just was on a smaller scale. You know, it's all vintage stuff, and
Yeah.
I had my collections and my library, and you know, it was a whole like, you know, it was a whole thing. It just like, you know, even in the quiet moments when you're alone, just to pick up a book and like go through it and put it back down, like satisfied, a little bit satisfied, you know, that's important, that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And you guys had, I saw you guys had quite the storm there earlier this summer. Uh, you lost like I think what like 2,000 negatives, like the roof blew off or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Over 2000. Yeah.
Damn.
Part of the brute. Yeah. We had a huge storm, and it was like 60-mile-an-hour winds, and it blew a section of the roof off, and water got in it, and the roof was sloped. So the water ran down to
Hmm.
where the negs are stored and just started pouring into boxes full of negatives. And yeah, we lost like 2000 eggs. I lost some really good ones. I don't know if, you know, I didn't lose anything that made me cry, but I lost a lot of stuff that I felt like I worked really freaking hard on,
Definitely.
and whole jobs, like the whole thing would just be, the job envelope would just be completely soaked through, and the emulsion was, by the time I could get to it, the emulsion had come off of so many of the negs because they were in contact with like the glassines and all that. There mostly it was 95% of it was 4x5.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a very small amount of 120 or 220 in there, but mostly all 4x5.
Yeah.
Mostly black and white. Yeah, there's a fair amount of color too, actually.
Um, I was interested in talking to you. Our new Vice President elect Kamala Harris. You had the opportunity to photograph her. We talked a little bit about like last time I was at their politics and stuff. I guess what was kind of your experience photographing her, and are you now kind of hopeful moving forward? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to is not waking up every day and having some another like crazy
Yeah.
tweet or some inappropriate behavior. Uh, I think we need a leader that acts appropriately and with reverence to the American people as a whole. And I feel like Biden is a good man. I
Yeah.
don't feel like he's a controversial man. I think he's a good man. I think he's solid. I think he's an honest man. And I think that's what we need. And we've not had that for 4 years. So I think that'll be a nice thing finally, and someone that's not trying to spread misinformation and all those things. Kamala actually, when the prior to Biden being nominated as the Democratic candidate, I actually was hoping Kamala was the one that got the nomination, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
because I know there's controversy in her past with regards to like jailing people for marijuana and stuff like that, like stuff they probably wouldn't be jailed for now.
Mm-hmm.
But those were the laws then, and that's the laws changed and things changed. But what I do know about her is that she's incredibly intelligent, and she can hold her own. She can hold her own in any room with any group of men. She can hang, and I think that's really important. And I really like the idea of having a woman president. To be honest with you, I think women are just better at stuff than men are. Men are, I mean, as we're seeing right now, like the level of egoism and narcissism that is in the office at this time. That soon will be soon we won't see, and we're not going to see that with Biden. I'm convinced.
Yeah.
I doubt if Biden's going to be holding big rallies in his own honor, and he'll be working every day. He won't be golfing all the time. He'll be
Yeah.
working, and I think that's what we need: someone that's working. I want to know that there's a smart guy doing the job.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want to know. That's what I want. It's like when people would, and yet definitely like the guy who's in office is definitely not the most qualified guy, kind of ever,
Yeah.
right? Like some political scientist from like Harvard should be the fucking president. Someone that understands and doesn't, the whole notion of like politics, it completely like deludes like, Jon Stewart should be president or something, smart as hell, gets politics really well. Like, he's a no bullshit guy. Like I thought early on, I'm like, man, Jon Stewart should run for president. Like he could talk circles around any of these clowns.
He definitely
But
could.
anyway, yeah, I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be hopefully like a really quiet presidency, and that's what we want. That's what we need. We need to know that someone's doing the job and not trying to make a mess, not trying to like pit people against people, not constantly lying, constantly making things up. We just need someone that will do the job. That's what we need. And I feel like Biden will do the job. Was he my first choice? No. Will he do a great job? I think he'll do a great job. I think he'll do a solid job. So
Yeah. One thing I was interested in talking to you about, uh, uh, you spent a lot of time working for Texas Monthly, shooting like photo essays, and I was just kind of curious, like, what's your like approach to like shooting like essays when you're doing that type of work? Like, do you kind of go in like mapped out of like how you're gonna execute it when you're like telling a long format story like that, or you kind of just let things kind of unfold while you're shooting it? I guess.
well, it's funny you should ask about that because I just spent the last week shooting on a photo essay for Texas Monthly.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, I think what I try to do right off the bat is determine like the intent, like what's my intent? What do I want this thing to look like? What do I want it to be? And once I establish the intent and the desired sort of aesthetic and like what it should be, pick the tool that works the best, whether it's like Hasselblad, which a lot of the photo essays I shot for Texas Monthly were shot with Hasselblad. I shot photo essays for them that were shot on 4x5.
Mm-hmm.
This particular one I shot 35 color. Um, and I pretty much in my mind like worked out like what it was going to look like. You know, I kind of came up with a backstory. I was like, okay, I'm going to be like an alien who got dropped into this region and is responding to what he sees here. And so I kind of used that as my starting point and just went out. We went out to the Permian Basin, which is this area of like 17 counties where the most oil production of anywhere in the world was in the 17 county area.
Wow.
And I went out there and just like observed, you know, and just shot.
You
And
just go solo, or do you even bring
no,
assistants?
I went with Johnny and I had him drive.
Got it.
Yeah, I think you met Johnny, didn't
Oh
you?
yeah,
You know
awesome
him?
guy.
Yeah, I had Johnny drive so I could just look. And I got a map of Texas and I marked the 17 counties and cut it out. So I'm like, okay, here is like where we're living for the next 6 days. And I'm going to go back again in mid-January for another maybe 4 or 5 days to finish up. You know,
Wow. Yeah,
it's
that
nice.
sounds like a fun assignment, man. Just kind of out there, just exploring, and like that sounds really exciting.
Yeah, it was very exciting and a lot of fun and really, really productive as well. Like I shot a lot of stuff and I shot a lot of really good stuff and really proud. It's probably one of my favorite photo essays I've ever done. I'm really happy with it. Like a kind of an embarrassment of riches a little bit.
And when you approach that type of work, do you approach it like in a traditional like photojournalist sense, like the quote unquote traditional photojournalist, like if you're at New York Times, so you can't do a lot of editing to your work, or like how do you kind of approach that like essay documentary style work in terms of like the editing, I guess?
As far as the editing goes, you know, for everything I do, I mean, I would say I do color treatments to stuff, but I also this stuff's pretty straight. And you know, I was doing things like saying, okay, I want to be in this area right here at the end of the day so I can get good light for the end of the day. And so we'd go out of our way to like make sure we were back in this spot so I could get this shot, this shot, this shot. Like I work out the shots I wanted to get. You know, we'd check the sun, where the sun was going to go down and stuff like that. So we figure out what the lighting was going to look like. But as far as editing, it's really straight. It's really straightforward. It's really pretty. A lot of it's really bright because it's like a bright, dry landscape. And so during the day when I was shooting, which I shot during the day as well, it
Mm-hmm.
has that kind of almost baked feel. And then the stuff at the end of the day is just this beautiful, like, you know, glowing kind of beautiful light. And then obviously shooting even after the sun was down, just in that magic hour period. I saw this really cool film yesterday called The Banishment.
Yeah.
It's a Russian film, and I was listening to an interview with. Do you ever listen to Team Deacons at all? The podcast.
Oh yeah, dude. That's like I've been listening to that lately. I listened to the Jake Gyllenhaal episode the other day, and like
Yeah,
I've listened to a bunch of them. It's amazing he's doing that.
yeah, it's really cool. Well, he can't work, you know, so he's
Yeah,
like,
true,
him
true.
and his wife are doing it. It's cool. So they had this Russian director on there. His name's Andre, and I can't pronounce his last name. It's pretty long, like Zibwagdov or something. But I've watched two of his films so far because I was so kind of inspired to see the work he was doing based on just on the conversation. He had him and his DP. They always work together, and so Roger was interviewing the both of them. And so this one film he shot that I watched was so interesting. They shot it way in the north of Russia, like by the Arctic Circle, and
Yeah.
they shot it in the summer. So they had like 6 hours of sweet light. They had
Wow.
like 6 hours of magic hour
Damn.
because you know it stays light till like midnight.
Shoot a whole portfolio out there.
Dude, it was amazing. And I watched it and I'm like, you know, it was almost like watching Days of Heaven, where but every day during Days of Heaven they were waiting for light. You know, they had to wait, and then they would scramble to shoot at sweet light for a couple hours. And this guy had like his whole shooting day was basically magic hour and the end of the day. and it was really kind of amazing. But you know, we're definitely like, as far as the editing and stuff goes on these, you know, these are 35 available light, right? So I'm shooting with the Canon, so 50 megapixel available light, pretty deep stop usually, so everything's sharp.
Yeah.
And they kind of look how they look, you know. I mean, it's what it looks like, and it's hard to describe it. I mean, you've always had to find the color, find the thing, you know, that you need. And you know, they're driven largely by content, you know. I mean, I said I'm not shooting any people,
Yep.
only shooting like landscapes, call them landscapes, but only shooting landscapes, whether it's the side of the road or on the end of some dirt road or whatever. But yeah, it's worked out pretty well.
Right on. A couple more questions. I'll let you go. Um, what do you say to people that are, they're interested in portrait photography? Like, what are some things you think they should do if you're looking to pursue that type of work? Like, what are some things they should focus on if they're trying to build like a portfolio in portraiture, I guess?
I mean, I can speak to like what I did, and that is I just did portraits of all my friends,
Mm-hmm.
and I would set them up just like it was an assignment. You know, I'd have them come over to my studio in New York, or to in when I was in California early on, like when I was a newspaper photographer. I had a studio where I lived. I lived in a house. I had a studio and converted the living room completely into a studio shooting space. Kept the lights up so they were always up, you know, and have
Yeah.
people come over and shoot portraits of them and just practice.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you shoot a bunch of good portraits of people and you show them to someone, and they can see your ability. You know, it doesn't have to be a portrait of like, you know, Jake Gyllenhaal or whatever. It can be anything,
Yeah.
and they can see your ability, and maybe then you get a break. I mean, the first kind of A-list celebrity, sort of A-list actor I ever photographed was Denzel Washington,
Yeah.
and it was a assignment from New York Times Magazine, and it was one of those ones where it was like, you know, I'd shot portraits, I'd shot actors, I'd shot, you know, I just had never shot anybody on that level at that time. And so I can look at that as a defining moment because I did a very specific thing on that shoot and I got work from that right away. Literally Monday. It ran on Sunday. It's kind of that old adage about cars, you know, race on Sunday, buy on Monday. Back when cars were like, you know, Chevys versus Fords versus
Yeah.
Chrysler. Um, and it was one of those, I can see that moment. You know, other moments are more subtle and nuanced, you know, and you don't really know where you got a job from. You don't really know, like, especially now, I don't know why I get the assignments I get. I mean, it's a collective of probably people looking at the website or
Yeah.
looking online or whatever, but that was a really well defined moment. I think I wrote about that and wrote a scene, but that was one of those moments where it was kind of like picture got published, work started coming in.
The
It
set
was,
was great. I
it,
love the set was awesome.
thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I built that the night before by myself.
That's a man. That's my New Year's resolution, Dan. I'm gonna get some tools. I'm gonna break out that saw. I'm gonna start getting to work, man. Start building some shit, you know.
There you go. That'll work.
And I guess my last question to wrap up, like, obviously a crazy year. Going into the new year. Any kind of goals for yourself or anything you're hoping to work on going into 2021?
Um, Looking forward to continuing on this geographic job, which I'm really excited about. Obviously, finishing up this Texas Monthly photo essay, I'm really excited about that. Finishing the movie, you know, getting the scoring and the sound and the, you know, getting the narration recorded and getting it all together and getting it into entering into festivals. You know, we got a festival start accepting stuff for 2022.
Is it a short film or is it like a full length like
The
feature?
short, it's 40 minutes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's a short film. It'll be in short film category, and you know, getting that into festivals is a big goal of mine. And then getting the next film project going. And I have one documentary I'm working on right now, and then yeah, just excited about like doing more film, to be honest with you. And there's never been more outlets for film as there are now. You know, I mean, with all the streaming services and stuff, like content is
Yeah,
king, which is pretty awesome
Mhm.
for from a director standpoint. You know,
Definitely.
so I look forward to that. And yeah, making pictures, doing books. You know, when I finish up this film, you know, I'm going to start getting a couple books out there.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
thinking about doing a book of this Permian Basin, to be honest with you, because I got so much stuff. Like, I always think like a book is like 80 or 90 pictures,
Yeah.
and that's a good like sized book, unless it's a monograph or like a retrospective, Um, so that'll be another one, but I have several other ones I've been working on.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And Dan, man, always a pleasure talking to you, man. I can't thank you enough. And have a good holidays, and looking forward to seeing more of your work in the new year, man.
Good deal. It was really a pleasure. Really good seeing you.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode with photographer Dan Winters. Can't thank him enough for taking the time to come on the podcast. Like I said, I've been a big fan of his work for years. Just incredible photographer, and always just working on projects and shooting. Just so I can't thank him enough. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, definitely go check out pickdrop.com. It's a new file transfer tool I've been using for a little while now. You can sign up. If you use the promo code PhotoBanter, you'll get 3 months free of the PickDrop file transfer platform. Just remember to use the promo code PhotoBanter when you sign up at pickdrop.com. But like I said, it's just a really useful tool. When I'm sharing my photos with clients, they can make selections. I create private galleries, and I just have all my work archived, all my selects. I know that they're safe and it's easy to download, and I just know everything's there when I need it. If I need to use it on my phone or on my laptop or whatnot, all my files are there. So definitely, like I said, go to pickdrop.com and enter the promo code PhotoBanter, one word, when you sign up, and you'll get 3 months free of the PickDrop file transfer tool. So thanks so much for listening. And as always, I'll be having weekly podcasts every week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as the PhotoBanter YouTube page. So definitely go check us out on YouTube and hit the subscribe button and like. Would be much appreciated. But as always, thanks so much for listening, and Happy New Year.